Everybody, Nick here, and today I got a review for you of an interesting knife in our Thrifty Thursdays lineup, and that's this little guy. It's a Higo No Kami pocket knife from Japan, and this is a traditional pocket knife in the Japanese culture. I don't know a whole hell of a lot about it besides that, but I do know that on the side here it reads Higo No Kami Sadakane Koma, and there's the extent of my Japanese. My deepest apologies to any Japanese speakers who are listening into that. It's kind of a problem for me. But anyways, so it does say something about that, and it's basically a name rather than any, cool meaning like, honor and prosperity on an inexpensive knife or something like that. You can get these from a variety of places. There are good people to buy them from and bad people. And I got mine on eBay off of one of the quote-unquote good sellers. And it took me about 3 weeks, and it cost me about $14 shipped. To give you a sense of size, here is your Higo, and here is your Spyderco Delica, and a standard US penny. So, let's just go on ahead and jump into the good, the bad, and the ugly of your Higo No Kami. So, okay, first and foremost with the good, one thing that everybody says about the Higo No Kami is that the steel is very good, and that is true. It's a nice steel. It's plenty soft, and it takes a good edge. So, it sharpens up nicely, and it is kind of a pleasure to work with, I'll say that much. And so you can get this very sharp, although it didn't come that way, but nonetheless. And another nice part about the design here is that it is very easy to open, and it's easy to keep open, because it's got this little lever on there. So you can just pop that open right here, and your thumb stays right there. And that means that even if you're accidentally knocking against the back of the blade, your thumb is going to stop it from closing on your fingers, which makes it a little bit more secure. And it's also one-handable with that, because you can, close it and open it using just one hand, which is nice. A lot of traditional knives don't really allow that. So I do appreciate that. It is a very lightweight knife. We are talking like 1.4 ounces, which is very, very light. You're talking something like 6 US quarters, I believe, there. And so very, very lightweight. And it's got some interesting history to it. I'm not a Japanophile necessarily, so I don't know a whole bunch about it, but it is interesting. One other nice thing is that it is non-scary completely. You can take this out in the lunchroom and people will look at it as a curiosity or a cultural artifact, and it starts a conversation, but it is never really viewed as a knife. Oh my god, scary knife. Which is kind of a beautiful thing. And then finally, the last of the good things is that it is $15 shipped, which is pretty inexpensive, especially given that it's coming from Japan. I mean, literally, mine came from a Japanese address with a little note addressed to me in Japanese, which was like, hey, cool, I can't read that. But nonetheless, it was a nice touch. So your good is that the steel is nice and soft and takes a nice edge. It opens securely, one-handedly. It's light, it's interesting, and it's not terribly scary. Let's go on ahead and jump into your bad. Okay, couple of bad things. First and foremost, it's kind of a little hard to get these because, they're not available at your local knife shop, and certainly not your local Walmart. These are something you really do need to get online, and you need to get them from a reputable seller. Because apparently there are a lot of really bad ones out there, and I don't even know what that means. But nonetheless, so you really do have to pick your seller carefully, and it's a process. You're going to get some international shipping, which is, interesting. It did not come sharp, particularly to me. I mean, it wasn't terrible. You could probably rip paper with it, but it wasn't sharp enough for me to carry it. So I did need to sharpen this out of the box and put a little better edge on there. And, that's less than ideal. And then the other bad thing is that it can't be disassembled. See, this is just some kind of a pin, and it's just hammered down on the other side here, which means that this is just pinned in place. I mean, it spins, but beyond that, there's nothing you can do really here. You can never separate these two pieces. So there's your bad. It's tough to find, didn't come sharp, and it can't be disassembled. Unfortunately, this knife has a lot of ugly, and so let's go there. So ugly number one is that this knife won't stay closed in your pocket. So there is just no detent on this. If I open it even just a little bit, it falls open. And that means that, especially with this tab here, if anything touches this tab, bam, you've got a knife open in your pocket. And that's no good at all. I've seen workarounds, and in fact, in order for me to even carry it for this review, I had to use one of them where you take something. In this case, this is just a small zip tie, because zip ties are useful for everything. And this prevents it from popping out. I've seen other things with paracord, and you can, of course, use kind of a sheath or something like that. But you cannot just toss this in your pocket and expect not to stab yourself. That's kind of crappy. I mean, there's a reason that every damn knife ever has some kind of a detent. And so, especially with this lever here, just inexcusable, in my personal opinion. Next issue with it is that the build quality is just terrible. If you look at the top here, so this is quite literally a very simple thing. It's just a sheet of metal that's been folded, and then in the middle they pin the blade. That's it. And you can see that the sheet of metal has a very significant bow to it, where it's wider, the pinch is wider in the middle than it is at either end. And you can use pliers to kind of pinch that shut again. But that means that the blade itself rattles back and forth in there. If you just have this in your pocket, it's going to rattle around like nobody's business. The edges on this are actually very sharp on the inside here, and we're not even talking like I complain about Spyderco's being a little sharp. This is actually really sharp. Like, I am afraid of this little edge in here. And if I gave two craps, I would probably sand that down a little bit and try and improve that, but that's an issue. So that's another build quality issue. Another build quality issue is that the blade actually has a fair amount of back and forth horizontal play here. And so it wiggles a lot back and forth. Ooh. And that's just no good. The grind on it is fairly asymmetrical and fairly meandering. I mean, if you look at it, I'm hoping you can see this here. If you look at the grind line there, you can see that it's kind of going whoop, back and forth. And then similarly on the bottom here, and again, I'm hoping you can see this in the video, this, as far as this goes down in there, is not actually sharp. It's not actually ground. And the ground kind of meanders on this direction a little bit too. And then finally, the blade itself is actually a little bit curved, which is just no good. It leans a little bit to this direction. So the blade itself is bowed slightly, and I'm just not a big fan of that. So the build quality on this is just abysmal. I mean, I can see how they can sell this for $15 shipped from Japan. But that's just really bad. This is probably the worst built knife that I've handled. Period. I mean, the Z Hunter had more going for it. That's cold, but it's true. It's true. Speaking of really ugly things that are true, this knife has no stop pin. This, I don't know if you can see that, but it's just quite literally a metal trough in there. And the way that this knife stops when it shuts is when the blade hits the very bottom of this. So that means that every time you shut this knife, you are slamming a sharpened edge against a metal surface. That's really, really stupid. There's not any kind of a stop pin. There's not any kind of an anything. It just stops when the blade dulls itself. And that's just bad. That's not a good design. It's not a good idea. It's just not good. And they could have fixed this by really, you could even do something like you have a very tight control right here that, makes sure that there's something that the rest of the blade tang can hit. I mean, they could have done better, but they didn't. And then finally, the net result of all of this is that this is not a knife I want to cut with. I mean, I EDC'd this for 2 days, and then I called it a day. Well, called it 2 days. Because, okay, the blade can get good and sharp, and I was able to sharpen it up. But when you're holding it, you're holding these sharp surfaces here. And it's in your hand that it's not really ergonomic at all. And if you let go with your thumb at all, it starts to shut down on your hand. But luckily, that part's not very sharp because it's not well sharpened. And this is just, I mean, of all of the knives I own, if somebody said, hey, Nick, you got to go cut with something, I would pick this little Victorinox guy as a cutting tool over your Higo No Kami here. Just because the handle is so bad, the blade is so, it just doesn't make sense. And so, it's just not a good functional cutting tool. And that just sucks. And is a real disappointment to me. So there's your ugly to summarize. The thing will open up in your pocket and stab you pretty good unless you try and control it with something ugly like a zip tie. The build quality is just abysmal. The blade stop is when the sharp edge hits metal to dull it. And it's just not really good to cut with. I mean, you can do it, but it's just no fun at all. Especially, it's just bad in that way. So, I mean, what's my final verdict here? So, I'm really, this is one of the biggest disappointments I've had in the reviewing game, because I got this one because, a lot of people talk interestingly. Oh, yeah, the Higos, they're really cool. I've been carrying mine lately. And okay, if you've got like a sheath or something, maybe. But I kind of expected, based on the way people talk about this, to have some authentic bit of wisdom from the Far East, some lost art of knife making, oh, it doesn't have to be so complicated. This is the truest distillation of knife. But, it turns out that instead of getting an authentic bit of wisdom from the Far East, I got an authentic janky-ass pocket knife from the Far East. And that's just not thrilling me. It's an interesting bit of history for 100%, that if you're into Japan or if you're, just want to be unique and you want to carry a Higo, okay. But, the best thing this can be said about it is that it's interesting and it's hip. But it's just a terrible EDC option, in my personal opinion, even at $15. I mean, seriously, for $15, you could buy yourself, you could buy 3 of these little Sanrenmu guys, and they're not great either, but oh my god, are they worlds better than this? I mean, for $15, you can get a whole lot of knife relative to this. And so, I don't know, I mean, so I guess that's my final verdict, is that if you're buying this for culture or for history or to be the most interesting guy in the room, this probably won't help, by the way, then okay, go for it, have fun, spend your money. But if you're actually looking for a functional cutting tool, we can do so much better. Hell, Japan can do so much better. This is made in Japan. I mean, one Japanese knife, another Japanese knife. Do your delica. But sorry, I'm just ranting. So anyways, like I said, the Higo was a big disappointment. I'd hoped for something better, but it turned out really just not to be. So, there you go. This is another in our Thrifty Thursday line. I hope it's been helpful and that I saved you $15 and 3 weeks of international shipping. And have yourselves an absolutely wonderful rest of your day.